is suffocating in all of this white noise, and I'm numb from head to toe. What I'd give if you'd let me listen, sing over me. What I'd give if you'd let sing over me. Is there a place to go beyond this talent show, to hear that lullaby you're singing over me?
Is there a place to go? Above all the white noise, above kind of like the droning and the monotony of the everyday, a space that I can rise above the white noise, that constant sound of chaos and busyness. Is there a place I can go? So that was Taylor's original song that she wrote and recorded, right? Right? Now, let's be honest, though. Taylor could sing Mary Had a Little Lamb, and we'd all be like, oh, my gosh. I can just feel it. Yes, she did have a lamb. Her voice is just so, it's just so wonderful. But that song she wrote, kind of just about this idea of is there something above all the polish and all the stuff where I can step up into a different level, above the white noise, and discover something different? So does anybody else have a white noise machine? Right? Good. Okay, good. Somebody else has a husband that snores. Cool. Cool. Yeah, so this is my white noise. Literally, I took this from my bed this morning. This is my white noise machine. I have actually grown to not be able to sleep without it. It's because it actually keeps distractions from me. Distractions like snoring and all those little noises, so that I can just focus on sleep. But that's what it's intended to do. And we go out of town, I actually have to have an app on my phone that has white noise too, because now I'm just so used to something that will kind of tune out everything so I can focus on what I'm supposed to do. And in this series, we're going to be looking at white noise. Now, Clay next week is going to talk about some really practical things that you can do to make sure that you're not using white noise to distract you from what you actually need to be observing about your life. I actually want to use this analogy this week to say, hey, there's just a reality about white noise in our life, right? Like it's really tough to go anywhere or do anything without some level of interruption or distraction. But our definition is going to be this. White noise is anything you use to distract yourself from dealing with what's really going on inside of you. And as we start our conversation, I definitely want to introduce myself. I haven't had a chance to meet you. A lot of new faces this morning. And my name is Jennifer Mazzola, and I am so thankful for the way that Jordan and Nate set me up to speak. Yes, I am a Bama fan. One boo. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mason, thank you. You thought other people were going to be with you. And now you're super uncomfortable, aren't you? Love it. My other favorite part about, as Jordan was explaining that Clay's going to be next year, next week, he's like, hey, we've got Jen this week, and next week we've got world-renowned author and best-selling and with multiple books, and he's lead pastor of the biggest church in the world. And then there's going to be Jen this week. So I am so thankful that I get to have some time with you this morning. Thank you for tolerating me. And to quote Nate, I hope you can find something out of everything that we're going to talk about today. But we are Bama fans, and I know, my husband and I moved here from Nashville about 4 years ago with our two sons, and so some of you are like, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. How are you from Nashville, but a Bama fan? And then your last name's Mazzola, which for sure doesn't sound Southern. And so it is true. My husband is from New York. He's an Italian from New York and everything that comes with that. And I was born and raised right outside of Nashville, but both of my parents are from Huntsville, Alabama. So my grandparents didn't have pictures of Jesus on the wall. They had pictures of Bear Bryant. And I didn't have a onesie that said, I'm just so blessed. It was like, just houndstooth. Everything was that pattern. And and I was like, someone's like, well, you're still kind of like a bandwagon fan. And I'm like, well, but if I was, what did I pick the worst team to bandwagon with? But we aren't going to talk about football. We're going to talk about your distractions and your interruptions. So think, what are your most common distractions and interruptions in a day? When surveyed, there are top 3, and see if these relate to any of you. Number 1, your cell phone, right? Number 1, the first thing is probably the most distracting for you is your cell phone. Number 2, coworkers. If you brought a coworker here to visit this morning, don't look at them. Just be like, no, you never interrupt me. And number 3, children. So, and the funny thing is about these 3 things, if you would like to pay your bills and you would like to be able to get in touch with your work to pay your bills and you have children, you can't avoid any of these. These aren't going anywhere. And research shows that in a given workday, you are interrupted 4 to 12 times every hour. When I first read that, I thought, I'm really waiting for it to be like 4 to 12 times a day, but every hour. And research from Harvard actually shows that on average, you're interrupted or distracted in some shape, form, or fashion every 40 seconds. Think about what's distracting you. Some of you even sitting here right now are distracted. Your phone is maybe vibrating. You're still thinking, why did that one guy yell? Right, Mason? Some of you are thinking about what happened last night. Others of you are thinking about what's going to happen tomorrow, but your mind is not here. You're not present. You're distracted. You're interrupted. Early in life, when I became a Christian, I had this image of Jesus, and I'm going to show up. He always had a lamb, so that Taylor Stearns could then write a song and sing about having a lamb, and we would still all love it. He was this picture of peace, and he was like he walked around with like this affect of just calm. And he smiled, but he didn't smile too much. And he was just really, it was like he was always centered and present. And then I would hear authors and speakers share about hey, you need to make space in your life. You need to make sure that you're getting plenty of time to meditate or to pray or to be still. I would even hear some speakers talk about I get up early and I pray for 4 hours. Like the number 4, not 4 hours, like 4 hours. And then I knew other people that would be like, oh, I actually took a closet in my home that most normal people would use for storage, and I fashioned a prayer closet. So all I'm hearing is, I can't do this. I can't pray for 4 hours. My mind won't be still for 4 hours or 2 or 1. I'm lucky if I can get 10 minutes. I don't have a prayer closet. I need storage. And I had this idea that there's something off in my spiritual life then. I'm somehow not going to be able to connect with God. But then I actually started to pay attention to how Jesus did life. And when we read in the Gospels, the reality is Jesus was interrupted, and often, not just every now and then. He was interrupted all the time. You know, according to Mark, in his account of Jesus' life, he is interrupted over 32 times. And then when you read how Matthew records his life, he's interrupted several more times, right? He's like, we have all these opportunities to see that Jesus has got a plan, he's got an agenda, and guess what? He gets interrupted. He gets distracted. So I want to look at just a few of those moments when Jesus is interrupted. Jesus went up on a mountainside and sat down with his disciples. When Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming toward him. I'm not sure if that's really most of our experiences. Probably didn't withdraw, and then there's just a great crowd. Another one. Jesus gave orders to cross to the other side of the lake. Then a teacher of the law came to him and said, "Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go," and then just began to ask him a bunch of other questions. Another one. Now when Jesus heard about John, now keep in mind this is John, his cousin, who has just been beheaded. So Jesus is grieving. He withdrew from there in a boat to a secluded place by himself. And when everybody heard of this, they followed him on foot from the cities. And this one, Jesus is on his way to a specific destination, and he gets interrupted as he's going by a man. A man came and pleaded with him, "My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live." So Jesus went with him. And then a large crowd followed and pressed in around him because that wasn't enough of an interruption. And then a woman is there who's been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She comes up behind him in the crowd and touches and tugs on his garment, pulls on his cloak. So I'm already distracted. I'm already interrupted. I've already changed path. Now I'm being pressed in and I'm being interrupted again. Right, so which to me means Jesus could 100% relate to the memes that we see of moms trying to go to the bathroom. Like, all we want to do is go to the bathroom. And we can't even do that alone. You know, in fact, it is not that Jesus doesn't try, but it doesn't matter what happens. He wants to get away with a few friends. He's followed. He needs to get alone with just him, and he just wants to be still for a minute. Crowds come. Disciples ask questions. This guy wants this. This person wants to be healed. Something is always vying for the attention of Jesus. You know, in fact, in I think 35 times that Jesus is actually trying to get to a destination, he's only successful in arriving without interruption or distraction 10. So this image I had of Jesus where he's like just calmly walking through everything, he actually is able to calmly walk through everything, but it's not because he's not interrupted or distracted. And I think that we think, if I could just eliminate distractions and interruptions, I would feel peace. But what if the question is less about how can I get out of all this, how can I get away from all this, and more about how can I learn about peace and purpose in the midst of this? What is always interrupting you? What is always distracting you? Who are the people in your life that are knocking on your door? Who are the people in your life that are tugging at your garment or following you across the lake where you just can't get a moment? But I want to look at how Jesus responds to these moments in his life. Crowds gathered around him again, and according to his custom, which means he does this more than once, right? He once more began to teach them. Large crowds follow him, and he healed them there. But the crowds were aware of this, and following him, he welcomes them. He began speaking to them about the kingdom of God. Over and over and over, he's diverted, he's distracted, he's interrupted. And he says, okay, let's teach, let's heal, let's talk, let's change. Let's look at what's actually happening in front of me and how I can see this interruption differently. He doesn't say, how can I get away from all of this? How can I get away from all these people? He says, what if there is a plan and a purpose even in the midst of all of this? If there's a reason I'm being interrupted. Now, if you've been here for any length of time, hopefully you've been able to hear from our lead pastor, Buck Giebelhaus, who is a UT fan, so that'll make you feel better. But you probably also means you probably know a few things about Buck. Like one, we know the hair, right? That's automatic. We also know he has a beautiful wife. I love it. We also know that he used to work at. Thank you. We also know that he used to be a professional and that he loved golf so much, he got this. Yes. Man, you know, I was already planning on using this last week when he showed it. I was like, spoiler alert, Buck. Like, if you have not seen this yet, this beautiful piece of artwork, Um, that's a golf bag. You know, it's funny because when Buck talks about these stories about his time at Dell or the situations in which he's been on a golf course and he's got all these moments, it's almost like he's talking about like Buck part one, right? The pre-pastor part. He has this other life, this other kind of world around him, and we get to get a glimpse. You know, so I'm just going to I'd like to give you a glimpse of my other life or my other world. Prior to being a pastor, before I moved here, I was a pastor for 18 years. But prior to that, actually prior to even becoming a Christian, I did what you do when you're a teenage girl in Nashville. I did country music, right? And so I'm going to show you who I wanted to be. It's also going to date me. But I'm going to show you this is who I wanted to be. Right? Right? Is this not the best era of country music? Can we just have this conversation? I know all the young people are like, no, it's new now. No, that stinks. This is like really, this is when it was good, 90s country. And I wanted to be these women. So I did everything that you do when you live in Nashville, Tennessee. I took all the lessons, learned all the instruments, did the things, tried to be all the country stuff. Anybody ever seen the TV show Nashville? Right? It's actually just like that. Just as dysfunctional. It's a world unto itself. The music industry in Nashville is a scene into itself. But as I got further along in that scene, I was like, I don't want to do country anymore. I decided that I wanted to leave that one-horse town of Nashville, and I wanted to be like these ladies. Does anybody recognize any of these ladies? Yeah, no one in the first service either. So let me explain to you. This is Carmen McRae. This is June Christie, and this is Cassandra Wilson, and they are vocal jazz singers. And so, you know, as shocking as this will be, there wasn't really a market for vocal jazz singers in Nashville. So I decided that I was going to move to Boston to attend college and get a vocal jazz degree. So I just want to, just caveat here real quick. Those of you that have just sent kids to college or have sent them a while ago and you think they're getting pointless degrees, I have a degree in vocal jazz and theology. And I'm employable-ish. Some people sometimes hire me, right? So don't worry about your kids. But I actually got good at it, and I learned a ton. And, just to kind of explain what vocal improv is, it's like if Jacob was over here on the guitar, if you've been here Sunday, he might do a solo on a guitar, right? Or an instrument does a solo. But in vocal jazz, you do that vocally. So it's not words, it's just syllables. Don't worry, I'm not going to demonstrate because it's awkward for all of us, right? But I got good, and I got this opportunity. A few of us at my school got the opportunity to take the train up to Manhattan and be in a recording studio with a vocal jazz group called Manhattan Transfer. And they were a big deal in the moment, again. And so I wanted to kind of demonstrate, who they are, because I'm going to share with you a moment. And the moment I'm about to share with you would be similar to Buck is playing golf with Tiger Woods. Or maybe if you're like a basketball fan, and I don't know, I'm not into this argument, but maybe it's Michael Jordan or LeBron. I don't know, whichever one you think is the GOAT. But that's the one that you're with in the moment. And so this is like my moment. This is my time right now. And I'm going to show you a clip. Manhattan Transfer and Ella Fitzgerald are giving a Grammy. They're awarding a Grammy together. But they sing for a minute. So they sing, and then Ella does what is vocal improv, just so you can understand what that's supposed to sound like.
Somewhere is heaven, it's where you are. The darkest night will shine if you would come be soon. Until you will be still my eye to the moon.
Yeah, so they make degrees in that, just so you know. In retrospect, as I have 2 teenage sons preparing for college, I'm like, don't get that degree. But I got out, so this was my moment. I was supposed to do what you just heard Ella do. I was supposed to scat, and I'm in the studio, and there's 4 people, and we're doing this thing called trading fours, which is where each instrument or each vocalist takes 4 bars to improv. And I'm ready. And I'm doing that dramatic thing they do in the recording studio where you put one hand over your ear. You don't even know why you do it. But you're looking into the mic. It makes for good video shoots. And you're singing, and it's my turn. And I'm like, okay, I'm ready. It's my time. And I sing one note. I don't move. I don't take a breath for 4 bars. I bombed. That is the worst thing you can do. You just heard all that movement, all those pitches, all those things that Ella did, and I was supposed to do something that sounded at least somewhat similar to that, but I held an entire note for 4 bars, just one note. Just one. And Manhattan Transfer, they were so kind. They were like, Will, sometimes less is more. But the reality is I knew they were never going to ask me to do anything again, and I didn't because I totally bombed my moment. That would be like Buck playing with Tiger Woods, but he misses the ball, right? Or you're playing with LeBron Jordan, take your argument, and you make an air ball. Like you don't even hit what are the things? You don't even hit it. And the reason I share that with you is one, just so you know that there are weird things that people do in their past. But then two, like, the funny thing about that moment was I was so anxious and I was so paranoid that I just kept the noise going. I didn't leave any room for a pause or a rest or an interruption. I just held the note for as long as I possibly could at the same volume too, didn't even try and get louder because I was freaked out. And I think we do that in life, right? We just want to keep the noise going because if I just keep the noise going, I don't have to pay attention to what's in front of me. I don't have to be interrupted. I don't have to be distracted. I can get all this stuff done. But I would argue that music is actually not music without interruptions. That next time you listen to music, pay attention to the space and the rest and the breath that actually happens. Right? That is actually what makes music musical, is that there are pauses and there are moments, there are interruptions in the music. And I actually think that is what Jesus understood that we can sometimes struggle to understand, is that it makes life musical when we learn to see interruptions and distractions differently. We see them as the problem. And our culture tells us that's the problem, right? You've had tons of books about minimize distractions. Do this so that your coworkers won't interrupt you. Do this so that your kids are occupied, right? Like we're taught, like go and get stuff done. But Jesus does this thing where he invites interruptions and he sees them as opportunities. There are a couple things to notice when we pay attention to how Jesus manages this. Is one, I don't want it to seem like Jesus doesn't ever get alone time because that's not the truth, actually. What he does is when he does get it, he makes the most of it. There are 2 verses, both in the Gospel of Luke, that we see where it says Jesus does this habit often. Let's look at these 2 passages. Jesus went out as usual to the Mount of Olives. The next one. But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. He has a habit of getting alone time. Now, what's interesting about this, because I think we can take that and go, well, then I have to get that way, and I have to do that every morning, or it has to look a certain way. But I don't really know, according to the Gospels, I can't tell how long it actually lasted, right? Did he get a moment of rest? Did he get a moment of alone time? Did he get a moment of stillness and an ability to kind of just stop for a second? Was it 5 minutes? Was it 5 hours? We don't know, and I think we don't know because it's not about the rules of the rest, but it's that when you can, that you take the opportunity to do it. That you take full advantage of the moments that you can pause. You know, in my life, that looked like every morning I do try and get up. And when my kids were little, this was way harder than it is now that they're a little older. But like I did try every morning to sit still for a second, have a cup of coffee, read something, be intentional, learn to like talk to God and hear what God might even sound like in my life because I just stood still for a minute. But I would get caught up in the fact that, well, it wasn't my 20 minutes or my 50. That's not the thing. Sometimes when you take that moment to pause, you're going to get interrupted. But did you take the moment? Did you try? Jesus made a habit of pausing, of resting, and of being still. So that when life did interrupt him, and it did often, he was centered and calm. The next thing we see Jesus that he does, and I think this is important for us, is he sees every interruption as an opportunity. And again, we're not taught to do that. We're taught to eliminate interruptions and not see them as something that we could actually benefit from, or maybe something God is putting in front of us to use to teach us something in the moment. And that's not just our culture now. Even the very people who walked and served alongside Jesus struggled with watching him be interrupted. Let's look at this scene with the disciples. Children were brought to Jesus in the hope that he would lay hands on them and pray over them. The disciples shooed them off. They are an interruption. But Jesus intervened. Let the children alone. Don't prevent them from coming to me. You know, and I do think this is, obviously there's a nuance here with its kids, but I actually think Jesus does this all the time. Don't keep that woman from me. Don't keep that person that wants to be healed from me. Don't keep that person that has that question. Don't keep that religious leader from me. And the disciples who had watched him navigate interruptions and distractions their whole time with him still forget. Like, that's not an interruption, that's an opportunity. I think God would say the same to us, even as individuals. It's like, you think you're interrupting me, but I want to talk to you. You think you're in my way, or I've got bigger fish to fry, or I've got something else I'm working on, but I want a moment with you. And because Jesus saw interruptions differently, it gave him the opportunity to see people differently. They weren't annoyances or nuisances or just one more thing to get in the way of a goal. It means actually Jesus had the opportunity to genuinely see people. You know, I am a list person, and I just really struggle sometimes with this. But what does it look like in my world when if my kids were to say, hey, my mom loved me, and she was neat and all, but she was always busy. She always had something to do. She always had a list. She always was distracted. Or my spouse comes home and sounds like, hey, I want to talk about my day at work. And I'm like, yeah, but I got to get the dishes, or I got to get to this work email. We're not seeing people. And when Jesus chooses to see interruptions as opportunities, he actually genuinely sees people. And we can do the same thing. One of my favorite authors is Bob Goff. And he's written so many books, but his latest book is called Undistracted. And he's hilarious. Any of his books kind of go the same way, but it's just these stories of these amazing adventures. Like, he just does the craziest stuff. He has the wildest opportunities. He's an attorney by trade, but he just starts to experience life in a way that is just so radical and so different. People were like, hey, you should write about it. And so he just shares these moments of just lavishly loving people and seeing people and creating opportunity for people. But 9 times out of 10, it's because he was interrupted. It was not a planned opportunity. You know, he has this quote, and I want to share. I am rarely the smartest person in the room, but I am usually the most available one. Loving people well means living with constant interruptions. Would your spouse say you are available? Would your kids say you are available? Would your friends say you are available? Would your coworkers say you are available? And I'm not saying there's not stuff to get done. We have to get stuff done. I like my list. My list needs to get done. But I have to pay attention, and I have to be careful that those things aren't controlling me and authorities in my life, but they are tools for me to accomplish things. I want my family to feel like I am available. I want my friends to feel like I am available. I want my community group to feel like I'm available to them. You know, Bob practices this so seriously. He actually puts his phone number in the back of every book. And I know this because I've called it. And it went to voicemail, but I know it's because he was busy. But he puts this in every book, and I thought, that's such a cool way. Like, that's an extreme way of being available as someone who speaks in front of so many people and has written so many books. You know, and so I thought, I just want to be like Bob, so I just want to share my number with you right here. All right, take it down. Did you catch it? Did you get it? Okay, good. You know, Bob has this thing he does. I've seen him speak several times, and he does this thing where he says that you need to be where your feet are. And he'll do this thing with the audience. He'll say, give me a 1-2, and he'll stomp his feet. 1-2. So let's do that, actually. So he'll say, give me a 1-2. 1-2. He'll do it again. Give me a 1-2. 1-2. This is where your feet are. Tomorrow will be there. Yesterday is where it was. This is where your feet are. When you are in the middle of something, where are your feet? When you're in the middle, I got to get to that work email, but that kid's like, hey, Mom, can I show you something? You know, or you're in the midst of that project, and that coworker, you got a minute? You're at work for a reason, to be available to your coworkers. You know, and I think what happens is we all too often get caught not where our feet are. You know, Jeremy Edelin, who I told him he's on staff here. I was like, dude, you're about to be famous. I'm going to quote you. So Jeremy said this when we were talking about this topic. He says, we can't be living in a different time zone in our brains and love people well. But I am so often in a different time zone with my kids and with my spouse and for sure with my coworkers because I'm just thinking we just got to get stuff done. But when my to-do list overrides my ability to be present, it is a problem. And I suffer from this problem. It's hard to be where my feet are because all I can think is I don't have time for this. Right? Think about the last time you were interrupted or you were distracted. And you think, I don't have time for this. I have to get this, and this done. And what if I don't have time for this? We could ask ourselves some honest questions like, why can't it wait? You're sitting there and you're thinking of all the emails you got to get to, but your kid wants you to sit down with them. Why can't it wait? Or when do I actually need to do this? Not when I'm telling myself I need to do this, but when do I actually need to do this? Or what in this moment is the priority? What is the most important thing? If you're a leader of people and you manage people through your job and you have people that work under you, them showing up at your door is your job. I was talking with an area CEO. He's like a really big deal. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're the biggest deal I've ever been around. And he was like, except for Manhattan Transfer, who no one knows. But I said to him, he goes, Jen, how's work going? And I said, man, I've just got all these meetings. And he said, the higher I went up in my job, the more I realized that meetings were my work. My job was to be available for my people. And if you're managing a household or you're managing a whole team at work, your job is to be available to people. Or what if another question we could ask ourselves is, what will actually happen if this waits 5 minutes? And if we're honest, guys, interruptions rarely take 5 minutes or more. Right? They're usually just, hey, I want to ask a question, or I just want to tell you something for the day. Or, hey, I just need to run this one thing by you. And maybe it's going to take 10 minutes, maybe. What's actually happening, and where are your feet? So I just want to, Clay's going to do a great job next week, obviously, because he's like a world-renowned author and leading mega churches. But if I could leave you with a couple of things this morning, what would your life look like in the midst of all the white noise? If you, just plan to pause. Make a plan starting tomorrow or maybe this afternoon that you would actually set aside time to pause. Now, I'm going to be clear, though. I'm not asking you to make a plan to pause for a certain amount of time. I'm not asking you to make a plan to pause in the perfect place or the perfect length of time or that doesn't get interrupted. I'm just asking you to make a plan to pause. That at some point in your daily routine, you are still and quiet. And if it gets interrupted, it gets interrupted. That's fine. But you're planning to pause. And then lastly, every time you get interrupted, what would it take for you to see that interruption as an opportunity? What if, in your planning to pause, you've stored up the stillness in a way that when someone interrupts you, you can plant your feet, get still, and see the opportunity that's in front of you. See the person that's in front of you. Because we risk a lot when we move through life at a pace that keeps us from actually being present. And I don't want us to miss any of the life that God has planned for us. I'm going to pray for us. God, I thank you for interruptions. I struggle to thank you for interruptions when they happen, but I thank you that they give me opportunity to plant my feet and to see what is actually in front of me. And God, when I get some time with you, get some time to be still, get some time to be quiet, that you could just remind me of that. That whatever unfolds from this point forward that feels like a distraction or an interruption, that I would be able to see it because you are at work. Amen. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you next week with Clay. I just want to say, roll Tide.